Order.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about China, but before I do, I want to just comment, in the last exchange with Mr. Roy, I heard you say certain practices were outrageous to you, and I appreciated that. And I think maybe we would have liked to have heard more of that this hearing, about things, acknowledging failures. I realize there are a lot of positives to talk about, but we do as a committee want to work with you. When Chairman Jordan asked why so much is redacted in a document, could we perhaps sit down with you, even if it's privately, and you tell us why that needs to be the case? If we ask for the names of these employees that were behind the Catholic issue in Virginia, can we get a commitment that we'll eventually get those names? I didn't hear that in that exchange with Mr. Jordan.
Well, you certainly have my commitment that we will work collaboratively with the committee. We obviously have rules that govern what we can share, and we have to be mindful of those too. But in my experience, that's what the longstanding accommodation process between the executive branch, especially law enforcement agencies, and Congress is there for. And we absolutely will pursue that in good faith. I know we've been providing an enormous amount of information, and if there are places that we can do better on that, we want to try to do better on that, if again, consistent with our rules. I'm very mindful of the fact that the whole reason I'm in this job is because my predecessor was fired, and in a fairly scathing Inspector General report, one of the things he was criticized for was sharing more information both with the public and, frankly, with Congress than was consistent with federal rules.
Thank you. Thank you for that pledge. Now to China. Most Americans don't realize, I don't think, that U.S. companies doing business in China are required to have joint venture agreements. That's been around since 2017 or 18, I believe. And it requires the Chinese Communist Party to have political cells within these enterprises, American enterprises in China. In the last few weeks, it has come to my attention that they've taken that up a notch and actually gone further, the Chinese have, and said that not only must they be present and have access, but they now control these American businesses. So they're, in essence, nationalizing American enterprises in China. And the CEOs I've talked to are afraid to say something. They say they've come to the FBI. The FBI, I think, is aware of this. I'm about to turn it over to you. My question is this happening, and what can be done about it? What do we need to do about it?
Well, I think you've put your finger on a very important issue, and frankly, one that does not get the attention that it really deserves. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I will say that, in my view, there is no country, none, that presents a broader, more comprehensive threat to our ideas, our innovation, our economic security than the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party. And in many ways, it represents, I think, the defining threat of our era. And when it comes specifically to the business community, while there's no law against joint ventures, the problem that we have is that the Chinese government all too often has exploited those joint ventures to then use them as ways to get improper access to companies' secrets and information.
Do you find that they have stepped it up, though, to where they are, in essence, nationalizing U.S. companies quietly?
In a variety of ways. I hadn't really thought of using that term, but I think you're onto a very important point. I'll give you an example that I think a lot of people in America still don't know about and would be shocked to hear, which is that really any company of any size in China is required by Chinese law to have what they quaintly call a committee, which is essentially a cell inside the company whose sole function is to ensure that company's compliance with Chinese Communist Party orthodoxy. If we tried to install something like that in American companies, or if the British tried to do it in British companies or any number of other places, people would go out of their minds, and rightly so.
Agreed. Well, thank you. I'd like to work with you more on that, and I'd yield the balance of my time to the chairman. Thank you.
But that's exactly what you did. And the judge said it last week. Every week you were meeting with big tech companies saying, hey, look at this. This violates your policy. Take this speech of Americans down. You were doing the same darn thing you just described the Chinese about. And can we put up the email that Mr. Nadler entered into the unanimous consent request? Can we put this up from the FBI to Bank of America? Because I want to know something. This is the full email. Go to the bullet point where it says, any historical purchase going back 6 months generally for weapons-related vendor purchase. You see that, Director? You see that bullet point? The one that says any in all caps, that bullet point? This is the email. How did you know? How would you know if it's a firearm purchase? How is the FBI going to know this? Put your mic on, please.
I'm sorry. I'm not going to start engaging on specific correspondence. I don't have the whole string here. As I've said before, my understanding is that our engagement with Bank of America was lawful, but that we also took steps, as we discussed in our earlier exchange.
Well, if it's lawful, why'd you take steps not to use the material? You can't have it both ways.
I disagree with that, actually.
Really?
There are plenty of things that we lawfully can do that we decide are better not to do, and that's my understanding is what happened here.
Wow. Wow.